it's your boy JJ Domination, and today we are here to talk about an interesting subject. Yes, I say that for a lot of these discussion videos, but throughout the season, man, things change, and sometimes you just gotta address it within the moment. Like, I could be wrong about something 4 weeks later, but this is why we talk about things in the moment, to kind of gauge your opinion kind of immediately. So we're gonna go ahead and talk about a 5-4 team entering in on Thursday Night Football in a couple of days as of recording this, and we're going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Steelers have quietly won 5 out of their last 7 games. They've quietly won 4 out of their last 5 games, so on and so forth. So the Steelers are quietly one of the hotter teams in football right now, and they're doing this with a backup quarterback, a bunch of injuries on offense here and there, especially like at one point using a practice squad running back and a converted, fullback to running back in Trey Edmonds, which, it's been an interesting ride for the Steelers basically, but let's kind of talk more about them. So there was a trade they made around week 3 of the NFL regular season, and for a lot of people it was kind of a questionable trade in terms of like the value given up and basically where the Steelers were in that frame of time. And it was a trade that acquired Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins for a 2020 first round pick from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, at the time, the Steelers were 0-2. They just lost Big Ben Roethlisberger for what they would eventually find out was going to be for the season. And it basically looked like for Pittsburgh, this was kind of a desperation move to at least get a franchise piece on the defensive side of the ball before completely tanking their season. Whereas for other people, at least in the Steelers organization, and for me, one of those guys that doesn't want to give up on their picks at the beginning of the year, in terms of like who I had in the playoffs, Pittsburgh for me was a wild card team, and it's still a possibility. I don't give up on my picks at all until they're mathematically eliminated, but they were 0-2 at the time. They make this trade, and let's just say it's starting to pay off. Now, I can't give all the credit to Minkah Fitzpatrick, but goddamn, when you watch the Pittsburgh Steelers play, you can tell that he has been a big part of their success because it starts on the defensive side of the ball. The Pittsburgh Steelers have gone back to playing Steeler football, and I know it's like an old thing that your dad used to say, or your older brother, your uncle, your grandfather. It's called Steeler football, and what that is basically power run and a physical defense up front with some opportunistic plays here and there throughout the secondary, and that is exactly what Minkah Fitzpatrick provides. When Nick Saban gasses you up as a player, there's a good chance you're probably a really good player, and you're probably going to be a really good player in the NFL. So I was really high on Minkah Fitzpatrick in Miami. When he was in Miami before he declared wanting out and wanting to be traded, I said that he could be the next Devin McCourty for Brian Flores, because of course Brian Flores has a background being a Patriots linebacker coach, defensive signal caller or whatever, and he goes to Miami, and it's like, okay, well, he's got a chess piece. He's got a guy in Minkah Fitzpatrick who could play free safety, could play nickel corner, he could be like the jack of all trades, and then he wants out. I can't really blame him. I mean, he comes from a winning culture and they're losing, so I would get it. I'd be frustrated too if I came from Alabama and I'm accustomed to winning. But that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. So Minkah Fitzpatrick gets traded, and the team is 5-2 since he got traded. And I think they started out the season 0-3 before getting their first win. So as soon as Minkah got there, it didn't look like it was going to pay off. They're 0-3. People are saying the Miami Dolphins might have 2 top 10 selections in the draft, and who knows, if both teams shit the bed moving forward, that's a real possibility. But let's talk about what Minkah Fitzpatrick has done in the last 7 games with the Steelers, basically since he's got there. Okay, we're going to talk about what he's been doing and what he was doing in Miami. So basically what happened in Miami was, obviously they were losing, and he couldn't really find a true position with the Miami Dolphins. You know, they kind of already had their free safety and Bobby McCain, who was originally a nickel corner, but they wanted him to play free safety. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, of course, talked about how he wanted to be a true free safety, and they started playing him at nickel corner. But if you watch the film and dig deep into the statistics and the analytics, Minkah Fitzpatrick was way better as a nickel corner than a free safety. So the analytics, the statistics, the film are all pointing towards Minkah Fitzpatrick being, you know, an above average to borderline elite nickel corner, but not being a great free safety whatsoever. If anything, an average free safety. So it was like, it's weird because like in Miami, he can never figure out, you know, the free safety position. It's not that he couldn't figure it out completely per se, but it was more of like the scheme versus what he likes to do. Because Minkah Fitzpatrick's one of those guys who he can play cover 3 schemes very well, like being the only deep safety because he can make the proper read, and you know, he's a very smart player. But in Miami, they do things a little different. There's a lot of man-to-man coverage over there in Miami. Pittsburgh does it too from time to time, but they're more of a zone blitz scheme. They've always been that way as long as I've known the Pittsburgh Steelers. But over there in Miami for those 2 weeks, if you threw it at Minkah Fitzpatrick, you basically had a perfect passer rating. Every pass was completed over by his side of the field, which was way, way worse than last year. As a nickel corner for Minkah Fitzpatrick, you basically couldn't throw the ball near him. I mean, your passer rating throwing at Minkah Fitzpatrick was slightly below average, so as a rookie coming in playing nickel corner, he did a great job. Compared to what he did at free safety for 2 games for Miami, you know, you completed every pass thrown at him. And Lamar Jackson kind of demonstrated that in week 1 by having a perfect passer rating himself. So now we get to what Minkah Fitzpatrick has done in 7 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has 34 tackles, 5 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and 2 defensive touchdowns. Now you're like, okay, well, that's great, but the real thing for me is they've been winning. Pittsburgh's been 5-2 in those games. And another interesting stat is on the season, at least currently as of recording, Minkah Fitzpatrick has more touchdowns than Odell Beckham Jr., which for Cleveland fans, that's just embarrassing, okay? That's just embarrassing. But what Minkah Fitzpatrick has been able to do in a new scheme that seems to fit his skill set a lot more at the free safety position, he has been a baller, and he has not only shot his stock all the way up, but it's entering Defensive Player of the Year conversation. And the Steelers have quietly won all these games. Yeah, they've dropped a couple since he's been there, but they have an opportunity to make the wild card at least. It's going to be tough to, you know, beat out Baltimore, who, you know, I was bold enough to pick to win that division at the beginning of the season when a lot of people were picking Pittsburgh and Cleveland, who will be playing Thursday. It's going to be tough to override them because Baltimore is one of the hottest teams in football, but Pittsburgh, and I'll keep saying it over and over, quietly have been winning a lot of football games. Have they faced the greatest competition? No, but they did have an impressive victory against the Los Angeles Rams at home. You know, the Steelers were at home. They had a very impressive victory. And it was my upset of the week. It was the pick that I went out on a limb and was like, you know what? You know, they're going to win that game. And they won 17-12. And, you know, Sean McVay and company, they were coming off a bye week. And the Steelers stuck to their guns. They played their brand of football. It didn't matter. They gave up that defensive touchdown early, but they didn't really allow, you know, they didn't really allow the Rams to really get into the game. And Jared Goff was horrible that game. But, you know, I'll talk about that more on the recap of the week. I'll touch more on that game and what I saw. But I know this is going to seem like a praise of Minkah Fitzpatrick type of video, but it is. I mean, his impact has been that, you know, substantial on this team. But also, rookie, he does play a lot of zone defense. He's a situational player for Pittsburgh, and rookie linebackers come into the league balling. So when you see huge, you know, and Devin Bush looks like he's going to be a great player for them. The defensive line continuing to shut down the gaps. TJ Watt having another great season. Bud Dupree's been playing awesome. And then on offense, yeah, they're not doing a whole lot of great things, but here and there you'll see a spark of what the offense can do, especially with the run game. But basically, Pittsburgh, they have a chance to make the wild card. So this video is basically about Pittsburgh in general, but I do want to talk about Mike Tomlin, because in all reality, this video should mainly be about him as a head coach. I think if this team can get into the wild card, he should at least be in consideration for Coach of the Year, because this offseason he had to deal with all the AB drama, Antonio Brown drama, just like Oakland did. But he got the short end of it because they had to trade him this offseason. They had to get him out of the locker room. They probably didn't get the greatest value that you should probably get for a superstar receiver, but they got him out of the locker room. And then your franchise quarterback goes down in the first half of the second game of your season. And then you make a ballsy trade to go get a second-year safety who's a good player but hasn't really been playing that great recently. You go and you trade for a second-year player. You give up a first-round pick to do that, despite your franchise quarterback being down. And you're 0-2, and it looks like you're going to have a terrible season. And then you go 5-2 since making that trade. You've been winning some close ball games. And you never really panicked, and you've always had your team prepared. And it seems like every season, and this is an interesting take I heard. I can't remember who said it. It may have been on First Things First, one of the Fox Sports shows. But basically, what one of the guys was saying on commentary, or when they were doing their analysis, was every year Mike Tomlin, it seems like, is on the hot seat because they can't beat New England. But here he is in a vulnerable situation with a backup quarterback, trading your first-round pick for a second-year safety, and just like that, they've quietly been winning games. Should he be in Coach of the Year discussion? And for me, I'd have to say yes, because of the situation and the hand that he was dealt. And trading your first-round pick, I mean, you're 0-2 with a backup quarterback about to play his first game. Like, that's huge trust in your team, trading that first-round pick. And I know for a lot of people, they don't care about first-round picks. That's great. That's awesome. If you're one of those people, cool. Good for you. Believe it or not, every player in the league, except for the undrafted guys, of course, are drafted. So the draft does kind of matter. They don't just come out of nowhere. So there's that for you. But yeah, I think Mike Tomlin should be in Coach of the Year discussions if this team does get into the playoffs. But it's interesting because you got Kyle Shanahan, who has definitely been better than advertised as a head coach. Matt LaFleur and what he's doing in his first season in Green Bay. And then you got John Gruden and what he's been able to do with the Oakland Raiders. And, there's a good number of Coach of the Year candidates. Those would be the top four for me. Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, John Gruden, Mike Tomlin. I'd probably throw Sean Payton in there, even though they just dropped the game against the Falcons. But it's a division rival, and those games never go the way anyone expects them to go, on paper at least. But hopefully you guys enjoyed, man. Let me hear your thoughts about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, do you think Mike Tomlin should at least be in discussion for Coach of the Year? And how do you feel about the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade based on everything that I've told you about with him, in Miami and whatnot? So, yeah, let me hear it down in the comment section below, and peace out.